Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Fireside Chat. We had like a small break for a couple of weeks. We had like some business trips and also the holidays. So we are now back, and we chose a new topic today. That is, how do we learn best? But before we start, so if you are new to this channel, basically the Fireside Chat is a chat that Mesh, myself, and Jose we normally used to have after working hours, having a drink, talking about all the things that we like, everything that relates to software craftsmanship, agile, and our jobs in general. And then at some point we decided to start recording them, and people liked it. So we are still doing it. And I would like to say, like, if you like those chats and if you want to be notified when we are live, please subscribe to the channel and and also contribute to the discussion. So go to our YouTube channel in the live chat and send messages. There are a few people already there. Hello, everyone. So share with us your experiences or questions. So we are always monitoring the chat, and this enriches our conversation as well. So the more of you contributing, the better those conversations are. So, right. So how do we learn best? So this was an internal suggestion at Codurance. People wanted to know how, like people like us, like in leadership positions, how do we learn? What are the techniques that we use? And one thing that we know for sure, and knowing each other for so long, is that different people learn in different ways, and we learn different things in different ways. And I think that this is what we would like to talk about today. So, guys, like, how do you learn best? Right? Let's start with this very open-ended question.
I don't know, Jose. I think you should go for this one first because you have all the. You are, after all, the our head of learning and development.
Well, I don't know if Adrian would agree with that, but I mean, as you said, I would say that it's not only that people have preferences. Now, some people are more visual learners and that kind of thing, but also there's certain content or skills or whatever knowledge, no, that is easier to learn in certain formats, right? And in general, there is this thing called Bloom's taxonomy. If you know, if you heard about it in the past, but it's basically a study on knowledge, basically, and how we, let's say, not only retain but are able to use knowledge depending on the type of knowledge that it is as well. Yeah, so it's not the same something that is procedural to something that is more a classification kind of thing, no, or you know, does this fit this category or not? That's one thing versus, you know, this is the step and this is the next step and this is the next step and so on, right? Like there are different types of knowledge and different types of let's put it like this, levels of adoption of that knowledge or the incorporación de ese conocimiento, like how you retain that knowledge. And it's basically structured into a pyramid, right, where you have things like, you know, being able to recall the knowledge or understand it, or, you know, that all the way to you're able to create, right? Create on top. You have such a mastery of that knowledge that you're able to create new stuff and evolve, kind of like the Shuhari kind of path to mastery, right? Like you first practice the thing, then, you know, you start moving away from that, then you basically own the thing, or shape it to what you want. So this is something that we use for training, for instance, no, trying to get all the way to the middle of the pyramid, which is usually applying the knowledge. Yeah. And in order to do that, depending on what you're trying to achieve, which levels, there are certain, let's put it like this, verbs of you know, call it exercises or approaches to the learning, no, that suit better that level that you want to get to. Yeah. So for instance, if you wanted to sorry if I'm speaking too much, but jump in at any time. But if you wanted to recall something, maybe using some sort of mnemotechnic resource, like invest, to know what are the characteristics that a good user story needs to have, stuff like that. Yeah, that's one, right? But that doesn't tell you how to create a good user story, right? Or how to go about that and understand whether out of two user stories, which one is best, or which one has problems, or which one fits better what context, and so on. So I guess that it's a whole world, no, depending on what you're trying to learn and what you're trying to accomplish with the learning, and based on that you can tailor that experience. I spoke for too long, sorry guys.
Now go on.
No,
Ash.
it's
Yeah, what about
so.
you?
Uh, well, I mean, there is a personal thing, and there is kind of the whole, all these different frameworks and so on. Kind of absorb and then kind of apply and reflect and all these kind of things. There's quite a few of these. Bloom taxonomy is one of them. There's quite a few of them, but I'll tell you my personal approach to learning, and then I kind of tried to make sense of it by reading a lot of it, and that's why I actually even did a talk on it. I don't know if you remember, Sandro, in SC London a while back.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I can do a shameless plug. It's probably on our YouTube channel, called Nature of Learning. But I'll talk about my personal, how I used to learn, especially as a developer. I was very much into trying things out. I like playing with things, so I was constantly playing with frameworks and languages and katas. When that became a thing, was also quite an interesting thing. I like doing them. Actually, I still do. In Clojure, I try to keep myself a bit current with at least the main features of the language, and I do katas and so on. And so I think the first thing was this active learning, which I like. And even creating small programs, things that I might like. That's how I used to learn. And I think, especially my programming skills, that's how I used to hone my programming skills. And even from a university time, I remember I really liked Linux, and I had wiped my computer off Windows as soon as I got it, and I used to play with these Linux distributions and try to kind of
Compile your own
compile my
kernel.
own. Yeah, exactly. I used to, like, they literally used to get lots of floppy disks on a magazine, and then put them together and compile them and so on. And I think a lot of that is called kind of creative active. So you kind of creating things, and through that you're learning. I used to find it very difficult to read documentation and stuff like that about, or books on programming. But personally, that's how it started. But I always had a love for books, but I mostly was reading fiction. But at some point, I started reading books about um coding and so on. And I remember The Pragmatic Programmer was the first book uh, that, oh no, before that, there was a Mythical Man Month. That the first book I read, which was like, oh wow, this is kind of helping me with something. And Pragmatic Programmer was another one that started. And then I started gaining more uh, interest in reading, and reading and applying, especially. And then slowly I started gaining more interest in reading about meta concepts, like, and more into philosophy and so on. And where I am today is actually more around, I do a bit of active learning. I like to do conferences and talks once in a while to actually to learn. It helps me learn a lot. The role that I perform actually makes me learn a lot, especially now. One of the things I'm doing is around product development, and I'm reading a hell of a lot in order to apply it. So that's kind of opened up another avenue for me to start learning again, which is really, really interesting. Uh, but I read a lot of, like, kind of, I've got Matter, so I go through harvest content from Twitter and other places, and then I put them on this. It's like a read later. It's called Matter, and then I read on that. But I'm always reading a book as well on some kind of nonfiction thing. And I'm also always reading a fiction book at the same time. So the nonfiction kind of reading suffers a bit. But I think now is my learning isn't very structured. I'm reading a lot, but I think I'm in a fortunate place where the work that I'm doing also makes me want to read and learn the new stuff that I am actually not good at, that I haven't, especially around running a company, around business, around finance, and around kind of like product development, kind of building that out as a commercial service, that side of things. So I know it's a long-winded answer, and I don't really have a structured way of learning, but I guess the main thing is two elements. One is the creative active, where I learn through creation, whether that is a talk or a service or working for the business. I learn a lot through that. And then the other stuff, which is the side, which is kind of a lot of reading around many topics, not necessarily that particular topic, but topics that may help me around that. I think those are the kind of major areas at the moment that I take my learning from.
Yeah. So Bodo mentioned something on the chat that I want to cover how it works for me as well. But there is some relation to what Bodo Rand wrote. So he said, like, I heard something that you can learn fast under stress and high pressure, but these knowledge and skills won't last that long like the ones learned under other conditions. And if we have an example from our consulting business, and if we agree with that statement. So I'll try to answer you, Bodo, but also sharing what works for me. So there are, as Mesh said, aspects of our job now are very different from how I started my career. So I think in previous episodes I mentioned we talked about, I don't know, career or shape or something like that. I started my career always wanting to be a specialist. So I decided to learn fewer things, but extremely well. And in that way, I had one kind of learning, because then there is for me a difference between knowledge and skills. Or even like, for example, experience, right? So you can gain knowledge, but not because that you have the knowledge, you are skilled in that knowledge, or you can apply that very well. So, and when you want to become a specialist, you need to get that knowledge, but you need to put a lot of effort in applying that knowledge. So there is a learning in how to apply the knowledge, right? So, and that you do mainly for us developers, for example, practicing, writing code, creating pet projects, doing katas, and working in real projects. And so you are getting knowledge, but also applying. And then that's when you get to wisdom. Like from knowledge to wisdom is you start understanding, how do I apply that knowledge in which context, and so on and so forth, right? So that's when you really master that kind of knowledge, if you like. But then there are the roles that we perform nowadays, like many people in leadership positions, in management positions, and stuff like that. You need to be a more generalist. You look after so many different things, and you need to understand them to some degree so that you can speak to the specialists, right? So, and in that case, so you need to get knowledge, but you don't need necessarily to be how can I say, experienced or a practitioner and so on and so forth. But you need to understand what is possible, what is not possible, so that you can offer direction and work with experts. So that for me had a different way of learning. And then we get to the realms of, there are things that I know well, that I know that I don't know, right? So for example, I don't know much about, well, at least I didn't know much about marketing when we started the company, or sales, or HR, or all the different functions that we have in a company. And over time, you have to learn to some degree so that you can work with the people that are specialized in that. The problem are the things that you don't even know what you don't know, right? So you want to create a strategy for your company. You want to expand to a new country. You want to create a new, I don't know, like a new initiative in your organization. Not all of them you know how to do it. You know what you would like to have. You know what that future could look like, but sometimes you have no clue how to get there. And that for me is a big part of my job nowadays is I know certain things that you would like to achieve, but I don't necessarily know how to get there. And learning those kind of things is very different. So, for example, Mesh and I, we were having this conversation earlier today. Sometimes you need to interview people. So say, you know what, we would like to have those skills in the company, but how does it look like? What we sometimes don't even know how to write a proper job spec for what we need. And sometimes you say, you know what, why don't we just speak to a few people and see what they do? And sometimes, like, if you are not like in a different position, you can go for an interview, or you speak to peers. For example, we found that people in other companies with similar positions, they also suffer the same things. So not long ago, we had dinners with different people from different organizations with similar positions, just to share ideas, similar that we do in a community, in a tech community among developers, and we were there doing katas and stuff. There are other people in similar positions that also like to go out and have a chat. And through those chats, we learn, oh, this is how they're solving that problem, and so on and so forth. So certain types of knowledge, they're not just easy just to read a book. You really need to speak to people because there are so few people that perform those roles that you need to go out and meet them in person. So, and then just last thing, going back to what you said, Bodo, like in a consultancy, not only in a consultancy, but any kind of job, eventually things will be on fire and you need to react fast. And yes, you are right. I agree to some degree with what you said. Is sometimes when you are under pressure, you end up learning just enough to put down the fire, right? So make sure that the problem goes away and you can go back to a steady pace. And in that case, you might not absorb the learning. You just like solve the problem because things were on fire. But I think I kind of agree to a good degree that you learn in those conditions. You are forced to learn, but not necessarily you will learn what the best way would be. You were more focused on solving the problem instead of internalizing learning.
I wouldn't 100% agree because I agree with you, by the way, but I don't think it's one of the one of the worst ways of learning. I think it's probably one of the better ways of learning, because I'll tell you why. A lot of the times we will read a book and we think that we know something, right? Whereas actually what this thing is about is application first. In fact, there is a book, I think it's Mastery. In there, he talks about like when one of there's someone was talking about how to teach people to climb a wall, do some rock climbing. And what he says to them is that one of the first things that he doesn't tell them anything about rock climbing. He just puts a harness on them and he says, okay, climb that wall. Go climb that wall. Right. He said, because I've said many things to them before, nothing goes in until they have learned to fail. They climb the wall, they climb it in whichever shitty way they can. And then when I start telling them things, they start actually understanding more. So I think there is an element in there around application that, and kind of stress and high pressure that, makes you motivated to learn something which is actually some form of applied knowledge.
Yeah, but
maybe not the healthiest mentally, but
no. But this was I would not qualify that in the best way or the worst way to learn. I would not even. I don't even think that concept probably would apply. I think that when you are under pressure, the goal of learning something is to solve a problem. You have a very clear reason for learning something. You have an important problem that you need to solve with urgency. So, and for me, this is a condition where you learn. But for example, there are many conditions. For example, Mash and I, both of us are learning Spanish now, right? So it's not a real necessity. So we go to Spain and we can get by with using English, or I use my Portuñol and it works fine. But there is a pleasure in learning a new language. There is a pleasure in communicating in a different language. So this one says, so depending on your objective, I think that your objective for what do you want to do with that knowledge, right? Is it to solve a problem? Is it to get a promotion? Is it to change careers? Is it to just pure enjoyment of learning something? For example, I every now and again read something about space and planets and stuff like that. I will do nothing with that knowledge, but it's something that I enjoy doing. So this is what I'm saying. I'm not sure if there is I'm like is the best way or worst way. I think that if you define like I want to learn, the goal of the learning is to X, and then we can discuss what is the best and worst ways to achieve that through knowledge. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I have a different take on this stuff, because he in his question he's talking about basically learning in a very short amount of time under pressure and so on. And I think there's a biological aspect to that and how the memory works in the brain. You have short-term memory, long-term memory, that kind of thing. The stuff that you learn through a longer period of time has more time to get incorporated into long-term memory through sleep and rest and all the other things, repetition, because that's kind of like the way that it works. No, like put it in the fast memory, and then if it becomes something that you use a lot, eventually, that gets passed on to the same way that if you don't use it once it's in it's
More
you don't use it,
memory.
you lose it. No, because the brain is constantly cleaning all that up. So basically stuff that you learn really quickly, like when you're studying for exams, and you just I want to go through all of this, the whole topic, is just so that the next day you can recall, etc., and be able to pass your exam. Doesn't necessarily mean that you incorporated that into your long-term memory and also absorb the knowledge, because there's another aspect of learning, which is the will of learning, which is kind of this cycle that we go through when we're learning, where you're reflecting on what you're doing. This is, by the way, why katas work so well, because they apply. You remember Bloom's taxonomy? It's not only application. You go into analysis. You go into a lot of. You basically can go all the levels with a kata, right? So you're reflecting, you're connecting to the knowledge that you already have in place about the topic. Or, oh yes, this is like in that language, no? Where we used to do this, or is this like this other exercise that I did, and so on. And then based on that, you decide what to try next. You're going through this cycle, and if you're not going through this reflection phase, you're also not learning. You're constantly doing the same thing. So repetition alone is also not enough. You can write a lot of code. This whole thing of 20 years of developing software, and it's the same year repeated 20 times is kind of what we're talking about here. So there's those. You need to go through the process, and at the same time give enough time so that it gets interiorized, and it's also easier to interiorize if you're connecting it to things that are already in place or things that are novelty, because the brain likes novelty. So there's a whole bunch of memorization techniques where you're kind of painting pictures, and that kind of like leads you to a train of thought. No, the whole memory palace thing and so on, right? Those ideas is, how do I make this knowledge stick easier? No,
but
there is one to go through it.
Sorry, just one thing to come back on that, because I have I don't know, thought quite a bit about, I hear people use many different systems to maintain what they call knowledge, and I've kind of said to myself, I don't have a system for maintaining knowledge. I write stuff down on a notebook, and then I throw the notebook away, or I don't know where I put it. And I very rarely go back on it unless I have to refer to it because someone asked me what was said in the previous meeting. And then I agonized over it. It's why am I not maintaining my knowledge that I'm learning? And at some point I decided, listen, this is, I don't need to memorize everything. That's not knowledge. Like memorizing things is not knowledge. Like knowing the 5 different or 8 different steps in Bloom's taxonomy is not knowledge, right? Knowledge is a conceptual model that exists in your head, right? And it doesn't go away. It doesn't come easily, and it doesn't go away easily, right? There is this model inside your head that's constantly being built. It comes through reading, and a lot gets lost, but something gets retained. You read that something again, and something else gets retained because your model is already richer, and it enriches that model. But the way I see it is that it's not like Chat GPT kind of generative model inside your head that you're kind of, it's constantly growing. And what's important is what's up there, right? And the way to kind of make that last is not through memory palaces, sorry, Jose, but it's through application, and it's through understanding and discussions and constant repetition. And when you're applying those things and when you're doing those things, it kind of stays. I even talked about like half-life of these things, right? The more you apply them, the more you discuss them, the more kind of you increase the half-life of those things, and the more ingrained they become into your mental model. And that's how I see it now. I mean, I don't agonize over where am I writing things down, or am I saving all the notes from my books and all those things. I think we should just let it go, right? Pick up that book again if it's important again at some point that you read 2 years ago, and stuff like that, just to repeat. But what you're maintaining is in your head, really, most of the time.
But I think that there is an element of this is what I was saying before. For example, in certain areas of my career or my shape, if you like, I wanted to be an expert, and in the areas that I wanted to be an expert, I went really deep, and I could mention bits of literature here and there, because like this, there is an element. I'm not in full agreement with what you said, Mesh, but I'm not that far. So I think there is somewhere. I was actually even trying to go to the dictionary and try to find the actual definition of knowledge. And there is an element of gaining that knowledge through experience, either through education or as you mentioned. But even if it's theoretical or practical and stuff, but there is an element of, like, for example, a knowledgeable person about a subject, an expert, for example, would be able to go very deep, and going very deep would mean giving details of all the research, all the publications that exist, and so on and so forth. That I would consider an expert. But again, I think that there is a different question: is do we need to be an expert in every aspect? And I think that the answer is no. Is, for example, mainly for the work that we do, like, you need to have a good awareness that certain things exist, so that when we actually need to use them to a certain degree, then you can go and research. So that's the difference also, maybe like from, I don't know, deep expertise to awareness, right? So we need to be aware of a lot of stuff that is out there, and then go deep when we need. This is probably a more healthier way, or more aligned to the kind of roles that we perform today, for example, given the amount of
and
work.
also by doing things like taking notes or creating a mind map or a summary or whatever, you're forcing yourself to really connect that information that you just, for going from recalling to summarizing to connecting to other concepts that you have in mind. Therefore, you can kind of abstract away all the stuff that you read, let's put it like that, and just keep the stuff that is important, so to speak, or at least is worth remembering. And that exercise in itself has value, because you are kind of forcing you to go through and do that summarization, no, in a way, which is, someone in the chat was saying, like, knowing which book to look at because you heard that it's already better than not knowing at all, right? Like, that's kind of the thing. It's like, I remember there was something about this, and then you go and you go deeper into what you need to know.
So I think maybe I should qualify what I meant, right? So when I read a book, for example, I have a method for reading a book. If it's a non-fiction book, can you hear me? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
If it's
There's
a
bit of noise,
non-fiction,
but it's okay.
yeah. If it's a non-fiction book, I have a method, which is that I look at the contents and then I skim it, and then I go back and I read it properly, and then I go back and I look at the contents and I skim it again, and then I think about some things and I write it down. I'm never gonna go back to it, but it's the reflection part and so on, just to understand if I got the concept. And I love it when the book has at the end of each chapter like a few bullet points and so on to help me reflect the chapter back. So there is this immediate learning kind of loops that you do, right? But what I don't like, a few times I've had some recent conversations as well. Well, people are agonizing about keeping like this knowledge base of everything throughout their life and so on. And I find it unwieldy. I mean, how are you going to get back to this? I mean, you know, like you talked about keeping a mind map and so on. Yes, of course, like some of the work that we do, I've got a mind map about the product development work I'm doing and so on. Of course, but that's, again, work in progress that is moving towards something, and not just an inert thing, a database of what I'm keeping behind me, you know, if you know what
no, I know what you mean. And I have a friend who's really good at using, you know, the Zettelkasten, I think it's called, method, right? This whole idea of, you know, you summarize a thing and then you connect it and basically create this graph of knowledge. Right?
Yes.
And then you can search the graph and you can do, and there's a bunch of tools like Obsidian, if you go to Obsidian MD, I think it's called, or whatever, that help you, no, with this kind of
and Logseek as well. I think there's one called Logseek.
Exactly. The idea of, okay, you're creating these concepts, etc. And that I think, you know, like a mind map works great for, you know, you're trying to understand the it's like basically building a mind map, but instead of building it in Miro, now you're using this other tool, and then it's there, and then you can search it and you can do all the stuff with it, right? Like I have nothing against that, and I know one guy, Paulo Domingo. He's really good at maintaining his thing. So this is a guy that you can basically have a conversation with him about anything, and he'll be able to tell you, you know, yeah, wait 1 second, and, you know, pinpoint, oh yeah, this thing, and this is where I saw it, or this is and that in itself, you know, if you're then using that to, I don't know, generate content, write a book, prepare a talk, etc., I find helpful, the same way that, you know, you would have to create the mind map from what you get in your head. So I see value in it, right? I don't expect that to be all the knowledge. Like, it's basically storage outside my head, that I can then kind of rely on if I need to. But you need certain discipline to kind of keep that updated, keep, you know, and maintain it, which I personally don't have.
I've tried. I see the value. I've tried, and I don't have the discipline.
Exactly.
I think that there are two things that I would like to add. One is about Herman. I think the right. So Herman said, like, joining Codurance, you must learn to learn. Is that way? Is it that way? Like, if you are not used to learning, you will need to develop that trait. So in this point, Herman, so this is not only about Codurance. Codurance is like that, but this is companies like consultancy companies in general has a massive element of learning, because you never know what your next project will be. So when you are hired by a consultancy, and of course Codurance is like that, but it comes with the territory that we are in. When we hire someone, we don't hire someone, for example, I want a Java developer that knows Spring to go to this specific project. We hired a consultant, a good professional, and we have absolutely no clue most of the time which projects this person is going to be working on. And it might not even be Java and Spring. It might be something completely different, right? So being in a consultant means that you never know what's going next. And we are going to move from client to client, from project to project, from different environments, different industries, different technologies. And it comes with the territory of you have to learn. Otherwise, you cannot survive. It will be very difficult to progress in a consultancy if you are not able to learn fast and be very flexible with what you learn. But again,
I would say that not just consultancy, but our other fields as well, but our field in general, right?
mhm,
There are people you can get by knowing one language, doing one thing over and over again, and you will get very good at it, and you'll make good money, and you can have a probably a lifestyle.
yeah, you
But
can specialize
yeah,
in Java or AWS or some or
yeah,
Terraform or
but
whatever.
Or
even then,
SAP.
yeah,
Yeah,
SAP, maybe SAP, you could not learn. But even like for example, Java or AWS, there's a new AWS service every week. You can't just stand still. You will stagnate very quickly, and our industry moves very, very fast. So I think what you said, Sandro, is not doesn't just apply to consultancy. I think it's more prominent, more important,
right.
but like in within this industry, if you are not learning, then you have to keep up to date to stand still. As you know, you have to kind of
If you're
run
not
to stand
getting better,
still.
you're getting worse, kind of thing.
Exactly,
No.
exactly. Yeah, if you're not learning, you're getting worse. Definitely, if you're learning, you might be standing where you are at at worst.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important because our no, there are a bunch of things in our profession that make learning so important. One is, of course, the level at which it evolves. Right, it's evolving constantly. It is a kind of more of a research thing that we do than like a repeatable thing that we do. So there is a huge scope just within the solution space, and then there is the problem space, because every time we change a project, change, especially in consultancy, but even our normal career, we are moving into new domains that we have to learn. So we have to become professional learners, basically.
You know,
And then you get to the, I think that this is the second point that I wanted to make, like still within the Herman question. So Herman, like there was a joke, not a joke, it was actually a thing in Codurance many years ago, because you in your question you said like you must learn to learn, which is true, but like we had something very specific that we used to say, you need to read books, but first you need to learn how to read. And in the early days of Codurance, I remember there was a year that we were talking a lot about speed reading. Speed reading became a fever in Codurance. Like everyone was talking about that, and because we were talking exactly that. So
It was the first book would recommend to everyone, just like first come in, read speed reading.
exactly. If you want to start reading books, learn how to read first. And
Yeah.
then this is where, so speed reading is key, because, and that's when you start learning that there is a massive difference between learning for pleasure and learning to get knowledge.
Or reading for pleasure, you
Yeah,
mean?
sorry,
Yeah.
not learning. Sorry, yes, reading for pleasure and reading for knowledge. So when you are doing things for work, and that also goes back to what Bodo was saying. So you have certain things that you need to solve. You have a new project, you have a new client, and a new technology and stuff. So you need to acquire that knowledge as fast as possible. So you need to read as fast as possible. And you cannot read every single semicolon or column that you have in a book. So Mesh was mentioning a few techniques in how to speed read and stuff. So learning how to read for knowledge is extremely important. Reading for pleasure, I like Mesh and Jose as well. We the three of us, we love fantasy books. They tend to be very thick and long books, but then you read for pleasure. Then I like to read every single word. I like to see how the author is writing the story and shaping the characters, but that's pleasure. Reading for knowledge,
But
it's
like a lot of the times, one of the things I think maybe it's a misnomer, like speed reading is a mode, right? So the book called, I think it's called the Speed Reading Bible.
mhm,
It
mhm,
talks about different modes of reading. And one of the things in there is that it's not that you kind of like, there is kind of techniques on skimming and all sorts of things, but actually it's more about understanding the whole concept of the book, because normally they have a story to tell, they have a structure, and you have to kind of look at the structure holistically, go deep, and then come back up and kind of go back to understand, so that you kind of understanding the mental model that the author is trying to project. And so it's not just about reading quickly. It's actually about reading so that you can it's about adding that reflection element to it,
There is a
and kind of
strategy.
repetition element to
So,
it.
so unless you are reading something like The Black Swan or something like that, where he purposely changed the titles of the chapters not to mean, like, because normally you would have that structure that you're talking about, where chapter 1 introduction, the chapter 2, so I
Yeah.
know I need to read this chapter and then skip whatever.
There's
Right?
certain
But
books that almost
if you have
impossible.
like
Yeah, well,
catchy
fiction books
phrases on
fiction books
every-
are normally like chapter
It's just
1,
the
chapter
number.
2, chapter 3.
Exactly. There's
Exactly.
not even a clue about what the chapter is.
You know what? And another thing that to go back to your point there, which is, and this is something I was talking about today as well, is the whole learning credibility tension, right? As a consultant going into a company, you're normally facing this tension where there's certain expectations that you need to meet, there's certain challenges that you need to face, no? And at the same time, you are learning, because this is the first time that you're at this company. Maybe you don't know the domain, maybe you don't know the technology, maybe maybe this is a problem you haven't seen before. Like, all these things are happening at the same time, but there are expectations around your competence, right? So if you're constantly asking people questions to understand, then you could put that into question, no? There's an aspect of acceptance as well, no? Do they do they see me as part of, do they understand that I understand, or at least can I communicate with them, no? And not be seen as a threat. There is the productivity aspect as well, because you're coming in, maybe this is the first time that you're doing that, but I'm paying for you, so I expect you to start delivering value from minute 1, right? So all of those things are there, and they're adding to the pressure of the learning that you need to do, which is very different from I'm going to have a pet project at home and I'm going to learn how to use, I don't know, Chat GPT and whatever, right? That's not is not the same, right? And
no, sorry, go on. I thought
No.
sorry, I thought you were finished.
No, and one of the things that you have, there's different mechanisms to deal with this stuff, but one of them is you need to catch up quickly on that context, right? So you may be reading lots and lots of information and being able to sift through a lot of information and understand what are the key points and understand what are the things that you kind of can use from that, or what are the patterns and so on. It's a skill. It's a survival skill in that sense, right? So yeah, just wanted to add to that, because there is that pressure as well, depending on the type of work. No?
I think a lot. Sorry, go on, Sandro. Sorry.
No, there was just one thing that I would add, is because most of the things that we've been talking about now, they are about us learning from things that already exist. Yeah. But I was reflecting, for example, this is for me the difference between almost like knowledge and wisdom, in a way. I was actually looking for another word that is neither knowledge or wisdom.
Skill.
There is skill, there is experience, there is like proficiency, there are other things, and intelligence even. But it was something else. But for example, what I wanted to say is, well, I'll speak for myself. I don't want to say that other people are like me, but for example, I sometimes need time for myself, because one thing is I need to have knowledge of what is out there, right? So, and that's when you do your research. Either you speak to some people, or you read some books or blogs or whatever else, watch some videos, conferences, whatever else, right? So, but quite often, I need to create a solution to the problem that I have. Not only the problem, but sometimes I want to innovate. For example, you are running a company and you want to innovate. You want to put structures in place. You want to create new initiatives and stuff like that. So you need some foundation to innovate, to do the thing that you want to do. And that foundation is knowledge. You go out there, you see what is out there and stuff. But there is a creative process that happens on top of that. And this is also learning. but it's a new learning. It is when you are, for example, you say like, I understand all of that, but I would like to achieve X. And I need time to digest all of that. And quite often, for example, when I was writing a book or articles or conference talks, we were creating new content. We were taking knowledge that exists, but we were also creating on top. And that creation process is also a learning process. And I am the type of person that I need to start visualizing things. I need to start writing things down when I'm in this creative mode. I need to start putting pieces and then start seeing that jigsaw and say, okay, this might connect to this might make sense.
The matrix, seeing the matrix.
So, but I think that one thing that we need to be careful sometimes is we need to be aware of what is out there. But we also need to be careful not to be limited by it, because otherwise we never innovate. So the real innovators, the people that really push the boundaries, take our industry forward, they are creating on top.
It's in fact, this is talked about at length in Robert Greene's mastery book, by the way. And I think in other places it's called like creative active mode. And that's what I was actually talking about, because for me, like the only real way to learn is when you creating, you building something and so on. And the book is called Mastery, and this is the last step of mastery, where you are creating knowledge on top of the existing knowledge. And often that is related to the knowledge that you have gathered plus the experiences that you've gathered. And another element that he actually talks about is that knowledge of adjacent fields. So actually it's the combination of adjacent fields,
cross-pollination of ideas
that helps you actually innovate and create new knowledge. I mean, of course, there are elements where you can create and innovate from the existing, but that is, then you are in savant mode. That's like rare and not very, not a lot of people can do that. But this kind of taking adjacent modes, taking ideas and aspects from different disciplines and seeing how they apply in your discipline, that actually helps you create more knowledge and
or give you a different perspective on things, right?
Like, I don't know. And experiences. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, because this is the thing. Like, so when I try to learn, I learn, but always to serve as a foundation for what I need. I don't take anything that is out there for granted, right? So, for example, it's not just because someone wrote a book that this person now is an authority of it. It's different. Like if this person is talking about math and some scientific experiment that can be replicated and so on and so forth. Then you can say, okay, this works because this person proved this way. If you do this other thing will happen. But most of the things that we do is like, how do we create this software? How we're going to run this project? How we're going to create a strategy for this company? Those things don't have a recipe. No. What you have is you have a collection of experiences, both from other people doing stuff or your own experiences or different techniques and technologies and so on and so forth. But every project, every company, every strategy that you create has its degree of uniqueness. And so every time that you read something and you speak to people, and I use as a foundation, but I don't treat anything as, okay, this is how we do. So, and with that foundation, so now I'm going to create on top. Now I'm going to take that knowledge that I now have, or that awareness, if you like, that I now have, that those things exist or those problems were solved in all those different ways. But now I need my own time on my own. Sometimes maybe like with another person or two, depending on what, like we do that all the time between the three of us, for example. Sometimes we bounce ideas with each other, but then there is that creative process. And then that's when there is learning, but it's quite an innovative learning. Like you are pushing the boundaries. We are breaking new ground. It might not be massive, like take the industry to the next level, but it might be that unique thing that you are creating for that specific situation. See what I'm saying? So I think that is quite an
Yeah,
important thing.
I'm going to move on to more on the point of the knowledge and innovation and learning from other fields as well, and this kind of stuff. Because if we're talking about what kind of things I do in order to learn, I'm always looking for new ideas or new inputs. Yeah, so I may look to biology or medicine or uh, AI or whatever, right? Like the whatever field something is happening in, and I would read it, and I'll find more about it beyond the article in Forbes or whatever you're reading, no? And the more you do that, the richer it becomes, because there's one risk that you take, which is to become kind of isolated, right? Like you think you've learned everything, no, you mastered the thing, like you more and more I find myself trying to go outside of what I already know or I already have some idea about, and so on, and bring those concepts in, and seeing, connecting them, and that kind of stuff. So I think that is something that I try to do. And for this, the things like, yes, blogs, news, etc. Yeah, I also look a lot of look at papers. Basically, like I go to the root. Like we are at a point. This is another thing I want to say. Like we are at a point where the types of problems that we deal with, there are no books written about them. Like not a lot of the problems that we're trying to solve are kind of being so explored that someone deemed it necessary to write a book about it, and so on. If that's the case, most likely, the big problem. There's a lot of material you can probably dig into that. And also, if you have to wait until the book comes out, books are great to give you the foundation, especially if it's an explore problem. But when you're already on the fringe or you're dealing with novel concepts, you can't wait until a book comes out. So I find myself reading a lot of papers on stuff. Like if I go, I read an article and someone says, "Oh, in this research, MIT scientists took AI," and okay, so that's that informative kind of divulgative kind of thing, that the article is and, okay. I'm interested. This is an interesting idea. Where is the paper, right? Can I look for, what are the references that they have? And then I go and read the paper, and then most likely I may even look into some of the reference that the paper makes, and so on. And this is kind of a great way to speed up that learning, because when you buy a book, it's 300 pages. Many of those books have maybe 2-3 ideas that you can take
And
away
then
from.
padding.
But you
Or
have to do
repetition, good,
300
because
pages.
they try to drive it home, but mostly it's opinion. It's
Ex-
opinion based on some kernel
but
of
but
an
it's
idea.
fine. It's fine, and that's good. And if you have the time to do that, that's great. But I cannot. I already have limited time for that. So I'd rather go to the paper, right? And you look at things like transformation, etc., right? Like people like Coder, no, John P. Coder, leading change, etc. A lot of the stuff comes from papers that he wrote from the for the Harvard Business Review, and then you can always go to a book and see on more of the stuff, etc. But you can do that, right? One way that I used to speed up that is like the Harvard Business Review has like the 10 best articles on management, the 10 best articles. I would go, okay, so what are the 10 best articles on this thing? I would read those. They a lot of the times they were about unrelated stuff, yeah, but that already gave you an idea of, okay, so this is interesting. I want to look more into it. Let me see what else this person wrote about. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
then you go and see that they have one book or two books, or they wrote another paper, or then they switch to another topic that is related to that topic, but so I try to do that. Like I read a lot of papers, or watch videos of people that read papers and summarize them as well.
That's the best. I love
Uh,
that.
so
Yeah.
again, it's about getting new ideas, getting new inputs, etc., and trying to optimize. No, and if something is interesting, dig into it. Now, nobody's saying that you need to stay at a superficial level, right? But if you find something, then you decide consciously that you're going to invest the time on learning. That's the way that I approach that.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the idea. I've read a few. I've followed a few podcasts where someone talks in depth about a particular topic. For example, this one was on functional programming, and it's a very in depth because the guy was writing a book on functional programming, and he was just digging into a lot of material and creating podcasts just for his own to build his own knowledge so he can write the book. And this I remember he was going through this podcast for 2 years, and of course like every week I would listen to it because he was doing exactly that. He was digging into papers, he was digging into research and all sorts of things just to gain his own knowledge. But that actually was, you were just following along in his process, which was brilliant. And a lot of these papers often they are difficult to read. They're not there's a lot of academic kind of approach in it, and you do have to kind of sift through it. And if someone can summarize it and tell you the kind of main aspects of it, it's actually even easier.
And now we have ChatGPT, so that's
now you just have ChatGPT. Yes, exactly.
But
so for me, it's still like as we are getting closer to the end of the hour. For me, there is like if you go back to how do we learn best, like so for the question that we had. For me, it really depends on the objective that I have with the learning. Another thing that is important for me to share is that I'm extremely selective with my learning, because like all of us, like well, not only look, everyone watching these and stuff. So we have families, we have work, we have other interests in life and stuff. So there is not many hours that we can dedicate to learning, right? So I tend to be quite selective and very diligent in what I learn and when I learn and how I learn. There are things that I really have pleasure learning. So I have absolutely no other motive except curiosity to learn certain things. So, for example, as I mentioned, I sometimes like to learn about the space and planets and stuff like that. So I love that Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? So, and he has a YouTube series called Star Talk. Yeah, so which I follow. I tend, so I learn a lot of stuff in there. There is another guy on Facebook that talks about Action Lab, is called. He just does very, very basic experiments on physics and stuff like that. Again, I have absolutely no utility for that knowledge currently in my work. And so, but I love learning that. So for me, that's a pleasure. So how do I learn best that kind of content? I treat it as an entertainment. So for me, it's pure entertainment. Every now and again, a video comes, I watch it, I learn some stuff. I don't need to memorize or remember, but I like learning about that stuff. It's entertainment. So I just watch some videos. There are other content that I really want to be an expert. And for those kind of contents, I go deep. I'll read every single book. I'll try to figure out who are the experts in that field. And I will read everything that they publish. And I will try to create on top as well. There are many things that we need to do for work, and we need to solve problems and stuff. Then I become superficial. I go and try to widen my horizon, read superficially stuff. So I learned, the way that I learn best depends on what I want to do with that knowledge. And then I will have completely different methods for that. And the fields that I really want to become an expert myself, then I do a lot of I don't even know how to call it, but like I like time alone to think deeply about that. For example, a very quick example, early this morning, I was having a meeting internally with some Codurance people. No, it was yesterday, in fact. And we were talking about well-structured monoliths and taking monoliths to microservices or just structuring the monoliths. And we were discussing techniques to do that. And one of the things that I was asked, like, what are the different types of monoliths? Because we cannot just create techniques to break monoliths apart. If we treat every monolith the same, and they are not the same, and all of a sudden we start going into depth of what kinds of monoliths are there, what kind of shapes do they have? And this is, for example, not an easy information that you're just gonna Google and find it or read a book. And this is when you start getting your knowledge and really going deeper, really doing an introspection, start understanding what are the different kinds, what kind of techniques would apply in different contexts and stuff like that. And this is a completely different types of learning, but I would have a completely different technique for that. This
is actually Richard Sennett has a book called Together, and he talks about it in depth, which is he talks about debate as a mechanism for learning. And in fact, he talks about the British culture and how we are so kind of beat around the bush and have so many etiquettes and so on, because actually a lot of these are mechanisms built to create debate, avoiding emotions and conflicts, because debate can create knowledge. And how when you are having certain kind of debates, you're either just trying to prove someone wrong, or you're trying to build upon the collective knowledge. And I don't know if it's dialectical or dialogical. I don't know which term he uses for that debate exactly. Is how you discuss, and as you're discussing, just like we are, for example, that suddenly new sparks alight, and those sparks can create new fires. And as long as you nurture them and then you kind of really look after them and start building on that, you can actually start creating new knowledge. Because often, reflection, there is the reflection within your own mind, and that's in itself very important, but it is limited. It is limited to your perspective. But then when you add that to other people reflecting through their perspectives on the same thing together, you kind of multiply these chances of creating new sparks.
Yeah, I say that this is the way that you can go beyond your ignorance limit, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
We are all limited by our own ignorance.
Yeah.
And the only way to go beyond that is like being able to bounce
To go
ideas with
outside.
other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
So maybe we're getting over
Yeah,
the
no, we are already
runner.
wrapping up. So I don't know if those were your final words, Mesh. That those were mine before. But I don't know.
I would. Yeah, that's good final words. I would.
Finished.
Yeah, I would take that.
No, okay. So then, as my final words, I would definitely encourage people to go to the source. A lot of the times, there's a lot of padding in the stuff that you want to read, and if you're reading it for fun or whatever, and you have the time, that's great. But there's a lot that happens as well in there, like the Chinese whispered kind of thing. Like somebody read an article and then they interpreted it as something else that was not what they meant, and so on and so forth. So overall, I would say try to go to the source. Read the papers or watch people who summarize the papers, and that will speed up a lot the learning, and you can always go and expand more on that. And I definitely recommend, if you're to management, leadership, business, etc., Harvard Business Review, MIT Sloan School of Business, there's a bunch that you can just subscribe to if you can, or go to a library or whatever, right? And get your hands on it, because it's really, really helpful.
Cool. And then, like, just to wrap up, like one thing that we didn't mention, I just want to mention that is an important point for me, is surround yourself by people that also like to learn, right? So either through friends, communities, companies you work for, but like there is a good element of, for example, just being here with Mash and Jose, for example, it excites me because I know that they are people that like to learn. So is this kind of environment that you have, that the people that you surround yourself with, helps you also to be motivated. That you need to have your own self-motivation, but it also is even better when you are in an environment where most people that you interact with also have that kind of drive to learn and stuff. So this is quite exciting as
You're
well.
learning together, kind of like if I'm learning, you're learning, and we're all sharing what we're learning. We just do it faster, right? Like, because doesn't matter if I got it all the way, I'm still getting some of that, so it's a multiplier.
Exactly. It's this community of professionals that we talk in software craftsmanship that is quite important, right? So, well, thank you, everyone. So if you like this channel, this chat, as always, like, subscribe to our channel, put the thumbs up in that. It helps the video to be promoted to other people as well. And thank you all on the chat as well for your contributions. Is always enrich our discussions. And I see you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.